This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 5th of September 2016, the podcast that doesn't want the world, just your half. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me this week is Travis Retriever. Travis, welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be back.
Let's anti-inflammate the news of the bogus. So one thing that people have been complaining about nationally is the increase in the price of EpiPens, which is the brand name of an epinephrine auto-injector manufactured by Mylan, used for emergency treatment of severe allergies. This year, the price of EpiPens has increased from $100 for a 2-pack to $600. The actual cost of the drug each pen injects is about 10 cents. Now, there is a generic Adrenaclick, but its price increased to $142.
Oh my god, that is just insane. Yeah, as a guy with a severe peanut allergy, this is definitely very close to my heart.
So the question is, why is this price so dadgum high? And of course, the news media as well as internet pundits are blaming it on, guess what? Capitalism. Even though the tendency is for capitalism to lower prices instead of increasing them.
Yeah.
I mean, really, why hasn't this happened with smartphone prices? They keep getting cheaper.
Because technology and medicine makes things more expensive, even though it doesn't do that anywhere in any school of economics and stuff, because potato.
So you had all sorts of people tweeting about it. Of course, Bernie Sanders had to tweet his opinion, which was, quote, "There's no reason that an EpiPen, which costs Mylan just a few dollars to make, should cost families more than $600. And Hillary tweeted, quote, "EpiPens can be the difference between life and death. There's no justification for these price hikes." Of course, this is from someone who charges something like $200,000 for a speech.
Oh my god.
But I've always found it funny that progressives seem to think that something should be cheaper the more useful it is. The more beneficial. It's too beneficial, it needs to be cheaper. It was like, what?
Aren't these the same people who lobby for what caused the increase in price, or if not, or at the very least support the laws that make it so?
Oh, absolutely, and we'll get into that. You have blogger Craig Calcaterra who said, quote, "The current controversy over the price of the EpiPen is quite instructive with respect to the nature of capitalism."
You what, mate?
And then you have Hallie Tecco, professor at the Business School of Columbia, who said it was, quote, "byproduct of free market capitalism," because nothing says free market like the pharmaceutical industry in this country.
Oh, man. Reminds me of the same people bleating on about the evils of the wickedness of deregulation of the financial sector, despite the fact that even then it was still the most heavily regulated industry in all of America, but details.
Now, what seems to have prompted the price hike is that earlier this year, Mylan's primary competitor, Sanofi, discontinued its line of auto-injectors, Alvi-Q, which was similar to the EpiPen, so pretty much Mylan now has 90% of the market share.
98, actually, according to the article.
Yeah, it's way up there. Basically, they own the market. So let's look at what happens whenever people try to come in and compete. For example, Teva Pharmaceutical Industries is trying to release a generic EpiPen, but the FDA said that there were major deficiencies in their application. Now, they didn't say what those deficiencies were. I mean, presumably they told Teva. Hopefully they did. But it really sounds like, it doesn't really seem like there was any problem with the drug or the dosage or anything like that. It really sounds like they just didn't cross the right T's in their application. I mean, epinephrine has been out for over a century. We have all that data over all that time showing how safe and effective it is. So really, this should be a best case scenario for getting an alternative to market.
But, without the FDA, we'd all be dying from fake medications from snake oil salesmen.
Right.
Even though we already have that.
Yeah. So, like I said, their only competition, Adrenaclick, is the only generic that's available, even though there are 8 different competitors over in Europe. And I don't know of Europeans just falling over dead from bad EpiPens or anything like that.
So in other words, monopolies are bad unless they're something the government supports. quotes, in which case they're great because potato.
And Teva says that they are hopeful they'll get it on the market next year, but of course that's not going to be much help now. And this article from Fee mentions a couple of others, Wingap Medical and Adamas, a biotech firm, trying to get past these barriers to entry. And I found another case of a company called IntelliJect. They were trying to get FDA approval for its epinephrine injector, and the holdup is to find a name that the FDA approves of. They tried changing the name twice, and each time the FDA's rejected the name.
Oh, God.
That's been the holdup. Just the name.
Good Lord. Another bit that the article noted that if you need further convincing that the FDA impedes the market, consider the following. The average time it takes for a drug to go from the lab to the medicine cabinet is 12 years, the vast majority of which is idiotic efficacy testing, either that or bureaucratic BS, like we've already mentioned. Only 1 in 5,000 new drugs will ever make it through the FDA approval. Based on the regulatory burden of creating new medicine, the average price tag for research and development for a new compound is $2.6 billion. Most drugs are money losers.
Yeah, and that's why they always have these designer drugs that they always pitch on TV and try to make these obscene profits with, because they're trying to make up for losses that they get providing other drugs.
Yeah, so as they continued, so no, Barney, it's not always just a few dollars to produce a pharmaceutical product. The price tag of producing that first pill is often rather steep.
And they also go into the Access to Emergency Epinephrine Act, which President Obama signed into law in 2013, which basically pays schools to stockpile EpiPens, so of course that's artificially inflated demand. And of course, from the time the bill was introduced to the date it was signed by Obama, Mylan stock had gone up like 20%.
Jesus.
And of course, this is also part of a general rise in the price of pharmaceuticals since the Affordable Care Act was passed.
That kind of blew me away. Yeah, that's a bit of a rule of thumb I've noticed with most of these bills and other laws is basically take the name, reverse it, and you'll pretty much have a damn good idea of its effect.
Well, it should have been a clue that this was heavily lobbied for by the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance companies, who are now making obscene profits, by the way.
Yeah.
And it also mentions a report from the House of Representatives, which shows that there were 10 different drugs that experienced even larger price hikes. Those include benazepril, which is a high blood pressure medication, that increased 420%. Pravastatin, a cholesterol medicine, increased 573%. Devalproex, a migraine medicine, increased 736%. Albuterol, an asthma medicine, 4,014%. And the antibiotic doxycycline, 8,281%, and all of those are generics.
Oh my God.
And here's something else I found out about EpiPen. Ordinarily, if you get a prescription from the doctor, like I'm prescribed painkillers for chronic pain, I'm basically prescribed Vicodin. As long as my doctor just puts down Vicodin, the pharmacy can substitute generic hydrocodone because that's just the same stuff, right? And there is a way that the doctor can specify no, use the brand name on the occasions where the brand name does matter. No, he has to use the brand Vicodin instead of the generic hydrocodone, but usually they don't, because usually that's not an issue. But guess what? That doesn't apply with EpiPens. If a doctor writes a prescription for EpiPen, the pharmacist has to give the patient a Mylan brand EpiPen. They cannot substitute the Adrenaclick generic.
Jesus.
And apparently the reason they say is that if people get the generic, they might get confused and not know how to use it, because apparently jab the pointy bit into your body is really difficult to understand.
Yeah, it's like, guys, if a friggin' junkie can figure out how to inject heroin just fine, pretty sure someone can figure out how to jab a needle into their thigh.
Well, like I said, Europe has 8 competitors, and I don't know of any case of someone getting confused and jabbing it in their eye or something. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But the article mentioned Adamas earlier. All they were trying to do was just sell pre-filled epinephrine syringes, just like how diabetics get the insulin syringes. They're already set to the right dose. They just inject themselves with it, and they're just having so much trouble getting it past the FDA.
Yeah. Yet another reason this idiotic organization needs to have its monopoly status gone.
Well, if you want to know what's really going on, just check out Milan's page on OpenSecrets.org. They lobbied Congress to defeat such bills as the Fair Access for Safe and Timely Generics Act and the Preserve Access to Affordable Generics Act, and such bills have failed over and over again due to this lobbying.
Why am I not surprised?
So if you want to know who's responsible for this price hike, don't blame capitalism. That was never given a chance to work. Blame the government. Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level.
Hey everybody, this is Dave of the Superplex Bros, and you're listening to the Bogosity Podcast. When you're done, why don't you head over to superplexbros.com. We have all kinds of editorials and reviews on video games and pro wrestling. We're also currently hosting a major project called the Superplex Pokemon League, and we're about to go into our 3rd season. We just had our actual draft, and we're going over all of the teams and their draft picks. So why don't you head on over there, check things out, and if you like, you can even check out the Superplex Brothers podcast, where Matt and I basically bullshit about video games, pro wrestling, or whatever the hell we want. Anyway, until next time, take care.
And now a story of more punishments for heresy against the religion of the Holy State. We talked about the Olympic athlete who was the target of an internet hate campaign because she refused to put her hand over her heart during the national anthem. Now we have an even greater blasphemy. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced or not, but that's what I'm going with, he refused to even stand for the national anthem. So, of course, the entire internet and all of the news media have been using him as a punching bag, spewing a level of hate, harassment, and threats that are far beyond what the SJWs even claim to get, which get people bogusly banned from Twitter, but so far, nothing here. So, there's a Slate article here that's actually pretty good. It's far from perfect, but at least Slate isn't the continuous fail that Salon is, so they're actually pretty good on this one.
Jesus. I was going to say, it's like, oh my god, Slate actually produced something that was actually not too shabby. I actually read this article beforehand, and I was legitimately impressed.
Yeah, they have their moments. So they go over Kaepernick explaining that what he was doing was protesting against the oppression faced by black Americans against the police, saying, quote, "There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder," like we've complained about numerous times on this podcast. So he's come under attack, and they've gone over 7 of the more common points that not only Kaepernick has been getting, but what generally comes up when people complain about this sort of thing. And one is they say, what about black-on-black crime, though?
It turns out that, surprise, they actually do care about that.
Well, and yeah, and they've done a good job raising awareness of it, but in this case, what would that have to do with the national anthem? He's protesting the actions of government agents here. So, you can't protest absolutely everything at the same time.
As we've had to say to many of our detractors before, it's possible to be indignant or upset about more than one thing at a time, though, right?
Yeah.
Y'all might not be capable of doing that, but we certainly are.
Point number 6, they're counting down, is basically, my troops! But the troops! Travis, the troops!
Oh, God.
I've never understood this argument. Our troops died so you can have your freedom, so that means it's bad to exercise that very same freedom that they died to protect.
I know, right?
Wouldn't it be a bigger insult to the troops to not exercise it? They're going to go all the way to dying so you can do it, and then you don't do it? Isn't the insult speaking out against the people who are doing things that the troops died so they could do?
And I also love how, as with the poor, it seems like with the left and the right, tend to have this weird habit of using the troops as, like, some kind of pawns. Like, if you don't believe me, check out a page like Occupy Democrats, where they love using them as their fodder every chance they get.
But what do the troops have to do with this? It's standing for the national anthem at a sporting event to protest bad actions by police at home. What does that have to do with the troops? But Kaepernick said, quote, "I have great respect for men and women that have fought for this country. I have family. I have friends that have gone and fought for this country. They fight for freedom. They fight for the people. They fight for liberty and justice for everyone. And that's not happening. People are dying in vain because this country isn't holding their end of the bargain up.
Well said. He definitely thought this through. He's very articulate. I'm honestly very impressed.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly thought a lot about this.
One complaint I do have about his methods, though, and yeah, the internet has made a big deal about this as well, was him wearing that Castro shirt. I mean, I could have understood if maybe he wore maybe a Martin Luther King Jr. shirt.
Yeah, you gotta wonder what that was all about.
That's kind of what he's doing. It's like, no, I don't recall him saying, let's go up to arms and start fighting back or anything the way Malcolm X did. No, this is just peaceful protest and peaceful resistance. Nothing more. Just like that was more akin to what Martin Luther King did.
So number 5 is, he's rich and therefore not himself oppressed. Now, this is a valid argument against people like that Mizzou guy who's crying on about how oppressed he is even though his family's worth $30 million. But I don't think Kaepernick is saying that he himself is being oppressed. He's trying to call attention to oppression of others.
Which would be obvious to anyone who paid attention to what he said. You would think the same people making this argument would direct it towards the very politicians and pundits who are also rather rich. But, you know, the we, the not we, state cultism at its finest, yada yada, here we are.
But Hillary is totes for the poor. She's going to go against Wall Street because they destroyed the economy.
Yeah. I will never understand the people who support Hillary. The closest to a platform she seems to have is, I have a pair of ovaries. Oh, her work in healthcare for juveniles has done more than the haters ever will or could. First off, citation needed. Second off, which was probably outdone, even best case scenario, by the arms she authorized being sold to those in the Middle East. Just saying.
And what about haters like the Koch brothers who have opened entire hospitals and wings of hospitals with, you know, no expectation of making their money back?
I swear, they're basically like the friggin'...
They're the left's version of the Rothschilds and the Bilderbergs.
Yeah, exactly.
So Kaepernick said, quote, "The protest wasn't for me. This stand wasn't because I feel like I'm being put down in any kind of way. At this point, I've been blessed to be able to get this far and have the privilege of being in the NFL and making the kind of money I make and enjoy luxuries like that. But I can't look in the mirror and see other people dying in the street that should have the same opportunities that I've had and say, you know what, I can live with myself. One of my roommates was moving out of a house in college, and because we were the only black people in that neighborhood, the cops got called, and all of us had guns drawn on us. I mean, came in the house without knocking, guns drawn on one of my teammates and roommates. So I have experienced this. People close to me have experienced this." So number 4 is, black people in America actually have it great, well, except for minimum wage destroying their jobs and welfare destroying their families, but...
And Social Security destroying their chance to save and robbing them from any chance of a good retirement. As soon as I saw this argument, the first thing I thought was taking a person who's 50% body fat compared to a guy who's 30% body fat, and the guy who's 30% body fat saying, well, I'm not fat. See the guy 50% body fat, he's fat. I mean, just because someone is more fat or worse doesn't mean you're better. Same idea here.
It's weird. It's kind of like a reverse nirvana fallacy.
I know, right? And in both cases, it comes off less as any kind of argument and more a weak attempt at rationalization.
It's like things are better than they've been, so that means that we shouldn't focus on the problems that still exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Kaepernick said, quote, "The U.S. has elected a black president, but there are also things, a lot of things, that haven't changed. There are a lot of issues that still haven't been addressed. And that's something over an 8-year term. There's a lot of those things that are hard to change, and there's a lot of those things that he doesn't necessarily have complete control over."
Kind of ironic that people would act like Obama is this magical anti-racist. Wait, hasn't he also, deported more people than any other president?
Yeah, pretty much.
What absolutely kills me about all this entire racism thing in America is that it's just a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't even need to exist, period, and wouldn't probably exist if it weren't for the government in its entirety. I mean, right after the Civil War, when the tensions are highest as possible, it turns out businesses actually, even ones run by people who are about as racist gets, pretty much had to allow blacks as customers, because it was either that or end up having more bills to pay or have them going unpaid.
Yeah, well, because they would have just gone to their competition.
Yeah.
The Jim Crow laws weren't passed because businesses were being racist. They were passed because businesses weren't being racist. And you have to pass a law to force them to.
So, despite the talk of the Wild West being this massive thing, I mean, the whole thing, it's on paper, it sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. A whole bunch of people all looking for gold, from all different races, you know, they have no ancestral common background, no common values other than get the money, we want the money.
They didn't even have much of an incentive to preserve future value because their whole point was, let's go there, grab some gold, and get out.
Yet despite that, not only did they have almost near negligible murder rates, ones that would have been even lower without the government and gun control and waging war with the Native Americans everywhere they went, they, through private property and private contract, ended up completely getting along and everything. I'm sorry, but when you have that historical knowledge, like folks like me, Tom Woods, Mary J. Rohr, and like you certainly have, I don't know, it just completely shows this stuff to be the total, I don't know a word for it, but just something that, it's an issue that doesn't need to exist, period, and wouldn't exist without the government.
So number 3 is he doesn't know enough about the issues, but listening to his comments, he actually seems pretty well informed.
And I also like that, which are none of his business anyway.
Yeah. So other people being oppressed are none of the business of the people in the country where it's being oppressed. I mean, what if our founders took that position?
By that logic, does that mean that our lives are not the politicians' business? Because they're certainly not oppressed. They're about the most privileged as it gets. Oh, but that doesn't count because of reasons. I mean, really, all these criticisms just seem to amount to just shut up and do as you're told. Oh no, here's the guy who's going to make me actually think. I don't want to do that. I just want to face towards the east and bow 11 times a day towards Washington, D.C.
Now, the Slate article is good about pointing these things out like you did with him wearing the t-shirt of Fidel Castro. It also points out that he retweeted a bunch of tweets that were rather hyperbolically worded, although in fairness, you can't get a lot of nuance into 140 characters.
True.
Number 2, he's doing this to get attention because he's not good at football anymore, and the biggest thing about this is he's done this a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, which kind of kills any chance of that being true.
Yeah, and I mean, no one's paid any attention to it before, so why would he think all of a sudden it would be this big attention grab now? And gotta love number 1, always a favorite. Respecting the anthem and flag by standing represents an endorsement of the United States ideals, not every one of its actions.
Oh, brother.
Well, as Kaepernick said, quote, "To me, this is something that has to change, and when there's significant change, and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent in this country, is representing the way it's supposed to, I'll stand." And that's the thing people need to understand. A flag is a piece of cloth. It's what that piece of cloth represents that's important. The U.S. flag once stood for slavery and the Holocaust of the Native Americans and the internment of Japanese Americans, and today it stands for dropping bombs by drone on innocent children in countries we aren't even at war with, and of throwing people in jail for having a few ounces of a plant and for smothering them to death because they didn't pay a cigarette tax.
And pretty hilarious that they would say that. So, but that stands for the ideals that this country was founded on, like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, limited government, personal liberty. And if you don't respect my flag, I'll throw you in jail or kill you. Yeah!
And of course, it also stands for a government that lets its own agents, from cops all the way up to Hillary Clinton, out of any accountability for their law-breaking and misdeeds. My opinion is, I don't think he went far enough. I've said this before, the problem isn't racist cops, it's racist cops being able to get away with being racist, as well as all of the other cops who do other horrible things even if they're not racist, and they get off with a slap on the wrist or even completely scot-free. It's an issue of accountability. But we've talked about this before, the law is supposed to apply to everybody. What we have today is a privileged class. The privileged class is not white people, not males, not rich people, but politicians, bureaucrats, and government agents who are now free to act with impunity, with very little fear of recrimination, and that is what we all should be protesting. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. So if anything, it seems like the bogus critiques of libertarianism are becoming more numerous. I just did one taking down a lame attempt by the Young Turks. There's another one in the form of a meme going around based on comments from comedian Keith Lowell Jensen, who I'm not familiar with, but he said, quote, "My daughter Max was going through a phase where every time she was told to do something, she'd yell, 'I love freedom. Why am I not free? What about my freedom? Freedom! Butterflies are free!' While we were out in the car, Max was backseat driving as she does. Stop sign, Daddy. Now check out the incredible Bogosity here. I don't think I want to stop, Max. You have to. I have to? What about my freedom? I want to go 100 miles an hour and ignore all the signs and lights. Freedom! Butterflies are free." This could have backfired horribly, but luckily she got the point and didn't cheer on my ignoring all traffic laws. She hasn't yelled at me about her freedom since, and that's how I talked my 4-year-old out of being a libertarian.
Where do I even begin with this?
I know, right?
First off, they both seem to be under this weird impression of the kind of European idea of libertarianism or freedom, that freedom means freedom to do whatever you want. No, it is not. I think Mary Reward put it best. It's not freedom to do whatever you want, it's freedom from first strike aggression. That is, no initiation of force, fraud, duress, etc.
Right, it doesn't mean freedom to endanger others.
And two, okay, but if no one's at the stop sign, like if it's a completely empty intersection, and again, if you're not harming anybody by going 100 miles per hour, then why not?
If you know it's clear and you know there's no one coming.
So, how is verbally abusing a child like that a kind of valid criticism? I mean, good lord, I guarantee that if it was a Catholic saying something like that, you don't do that or you'll burn in hell, I guarantee that the same people sharing this meme would have been crying bloody murder.
Yeah, and that's what's so infuriating about statists. They behave like horrible sociopaths and actually think they've done something good.
As you've said before, statism doesn't just seem to bring out the worst sociopaths, it also seems to create them as well.
Well, I think Tom Woods did a pretty good job of tearing into this guy, so I'll just read out some of what he wrote. Quote, "His deep and scholarly study of libertarianism has led him to the conclusion that we are against rules. So when libertarians play poker, each one presumably decides for himself what makes a winning hand. You thought that full house be my pair of threes? Not so fast, man. Or libertarian football means teams can have as many downs as they want, and field goals yield whatever number of points they'd like to have. Or when a homeowners association says not to build your house in the shape of Hello Kitty, we presumably go ahead and do it anyway. This is ridiculous, of course. Presumably, we'd also have to disregard all the rules of language and grammar and indeed of logic itself. And yet we don't. Huh. Maybe that's because we're not opposed to rules. No definition of libertarianism has ever involved opposition to rules. We're opposed to aggression, the initiation of physical force, and we oppose it whether carried out by a petty thief or by people in special uniforms waving flags.
Hell, even Dictionary.com will tell you that even full-on anarchy is not without rules. It is without rulers. We're not opposed to rules. We're merely opposed to violent coercion. If you can't grasp that, we're going to rightly conclude that you're a few tacos short of a combination plate.
And so Wood says, quote, "We're not even opposed to stop signs, if you can believe it. Any road owner will establish rules of the road for drivers to follow and be in perfect harmony with libertarian principles. Although it turns out that roundabouts tend to work better.
But that's another article for another day.
And shared space also works too."
Oh yeah. Now I know that the comments in these things are usually regarded as, oh, horrible, the worst of the worst, but I always love when the comments are actually good. Like, here's two that I thought were nice. From Kevin Geary, 4 days ago. "All his daughter learned is that her dad is a crazy maniac who will endanger her life at the drop of a hat. If only she had the freedom to leave him before the age of 18. Another one, John Ash, posted an image macro of the guy reading, "I made a joke about murdering or killing my daughter. I know. Funny, right?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real knee slapper. I just wonder if he really did convince her not to be a libertarian, or if he just convinced her that Daddy's an asshole and she shouldn't say things like that around him or he'll go crazy. I mean, 4-year-olds are more with it than people think, you know, certainly more than Jensen.
Heyo.
Want to get $5 really quick? Just fire up your mobile device and go to Get5, that's GET numeral 5.bogosity.tv. By using this link to sign in to the Amazon app for the first time, or if it's been more than 12 months, you'll get $5 off your order of $10 or more. So what are you waiting for? Go to get5.bogosity.tv. Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now it's time to throw the unabridged Oxford English Dictionary at this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to the ATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. So it really should be the BATFE, but apparently that was too long an initialism even for government. Now they added on the explosives part back in the 1970s, apparently when someone figured out that alcohol, tobacco, and firearms were all legal products and therefore they needed something else to justify their existence. I mean, you know the whole thing is a Prohibition era department, right?
I couldn't even get through this entire article because it was just so boring. I mean, despite being a full-on ANCAP and even Agorist sympathizer, I admit I'm not really that interested in guns just in general. I mean, they kind of bore the crap out of me.
Well, and there's a lot of science involved, so I'll take you through that. What they've done is to declare nitrocellulose, which is also known as smokeless powder or gun cotton, and it's used as an accelerant in a lot of ammunition. They've classified it as a high explosive, which means it's to be severely regulated. So let's talk about what that means. Basically, there are 3 kinds of explosives. You've got chemical explosives like nitroglycerin, which doesn't even have to be ignited to explode. Pressurized gas like in an aerosol can, which can explode if it's sufficiently heated, even if it's below the auto-ignition point. And nuclear explosives like uranium-235 enriched to above 90%. High explosives refers to any explosive that will detonate when ignited, and detonate means that chemical reaction moves faster than the speed of sound. But smokeless powder doesn't detonate. It deflagrates, which means that although it still burns very quickly, it does so slower than the speed of sound. And you've probably seen stuff like that. They've done this on Mythbusters a few times where they've laid the trail of black powder and then lit it and you just see it zooming across. Well, that's slower than the speed of sound, so that's not a detonation. So when the material provides its own oxygen, like black powder and smokeless powder, it's an accelerant, and you have to do that when you're stuck into this cartridge because there's no way for oxygen to get in there. Otherwise, it's just a fuel. Gasoline is a fuel, not an accelerant, because it needs to be mixed with oxygen. And also, something you might have seen on Mythbusters is when they try to do gasoline explosions, they have to get the right fuel-to-air mixture. That's why. Because it doesn't have its own oxygen, it needs to get oxygen from the air. But thermite, on the other hand, provides its own oxygen, so it's an accelerant, and that's why it can burn underwater.
That actually sounds pretty neat.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can put a video of that on YouTube.
But thermite is not an explosive. It burns, but it doesn't explode. So those are different things. So now that we've got a handle on the science, let's talk about what they did. So ammunition is defined in the Code of Federal Regulations as, quote, small arms, ammunition, or cartridge cases, primers, bullets, or smokeless propellants designed for use in small arms, including percussion caps and 332-inch and other external burning pyrotechnic hobby fuses. The term does not include black powder. Now, there is a small arms ammunition exemption, which is supposed to apply to anything 50 caliber or less, as well as some kinds of shotgun ammunition. And they give all of the, I won't go over all this, but they give all of the relevant newsletter portions talking about that. So generally what that means is that smokeless powder and primers are exempt from all of these record keeping and storage requirements, but other explosive materials will not be exempt until they're incorporated into one of the components. So what they said is that wetted nitrocellulose containing greater than 12.6% nitrogen can be lawfully shipped, transported, or received only by persons holding federal explosives licenses or patents. And they have to keep records of acquisition, and they have to keep it in the daily summary of magazine transactions and stored in storage magazines, meeting all these different regulations. Now, at the point where it's incorporated into smokeless powder or a complete cartridge, it then becomes exempt from all those requirements. And they also point out that the Department of Transportation has assigned a non-explosive classification to nitrocellulose when it's wetted, because when it's wet, there's not that much of a chance of it exploding if there's a traffic accident or some other kind of transportation accident. But it still retains its explosive characteristics when the water or the alcohol is removed, so the wetted nitrocellulose remains a nitrocellulose explosive subject to all of these controls. So basically what all of this means is that manufacturers now have to set up all of their logistics, storage, and operations consistent with this being regulated as an explosive when they haven't been doing that for years, so they're going to have to completely change what they do, get adequate storage facilities, get these new record-keeping systems, and also it's probably going to affect their relationship with all of these vendors that they've been using to store the wetted nitrocellulose. And it could also adversely impact their contracts with the Department of Defense. And when the ATF did this, they gave no warning and allowed no grace period. Just boom, this is the way it is.
This is most likely going to make it yet even harder and more expensive for people to get stuff like this.
Which I think is the idea. Guns and ammunition are already 3 to 5 times the price they should be because of taxes and regulations.
Jesus.
And it's weird because this is a right codified in the Bill of Rights, just like freedom of religion. That codification means that churches are tax exempt, so by the same argument, shouldn't guns and ammunition be tax exempt as well?
That'd be freaking awesome. And as always, this is pretty much going to do nothing except just make it more expensive and more difficult for the most vulnerable of society to defend themselves.
Yeah, I mean, this could have a big chilling effect on people who need firearms for their own defense, which are people who live in bad neighborhoods, which are people who live in poor neighborhoods, which are people who are poor.
Yeah. Yes, because to be a Democrat means that banning cheap, and in this case restricting cheap guns and firearms so poor people can't defend themselves, is being progressive. And to be a Republican means that enforcing the over 20,000 gun control laws and taxes and other bollocks on the books is somehow a valid method of opposing gun control.
So all of that makes the ATF this week's biggest Bogon emitter. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. And now here's another rare treat. Yes, we've got another recipient of the Silver Cluon Award. This is the only positive accolade we give, and we don't give it that often. And this week we're going to give it to Techdirt for their response to an anti-counterfeiting troll. And so they've been selling a t-shirt that says copying is not theft.
Which I will probably have to buy at some point because it looks friggin' awesome.
Yeah, it's a nice looking shirt. So other people have been saying, oh, well, how will you feel when I copy that shirt? Thinking it's some kind of gotcha.
I hate when people pull that. It's kind of like that one sociopathic comedian who pulled that crap. It's like, I hate it when they pull this gotcha crap.
Yeah. And one of them was John Anderson, who runs the Global Anti-Counterfeiting Group, who tweeted, quote, "Thanks, we'll make loads of cheap imitations and sell for £5 each." And so what they say is, quote, yes, he's obviously just being snarky and thinking he's making a point, but it still seems odd for someone who insists he's against counterfeiting to basically say he's planning to counterfeit our shirt. At the very least, it actually gives us a platform to make our point. If he really wants to do so, he can absolutely go and make those cheap $5 shirts. This is the point that so many fail to get when they freak out about people copying. If you've built up a community of people who want to support you and people who like and are interested in what you do, there's nothing to fear from copying. It's only when you don't have that kind of support or when you're trying to force something on people that they don't want that you suddenly have to worry about copying. And I mean, they point out he's not really going to be able to sell all that much because he doesn't have the same audience that Techdirt does. Techdirt has people who would want that shirt, and apparently he's out there appealing to people who think copying is theft and they wouldn't want that kind of shirt. But I mean, even if he did, and even if he's able to sell, a 1 million shirts, great! What a wonderful way to get the message out!
No kidding. I mean, either way, he's shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah. So just what a beautiful response from Techdirt on this.
Yeah, and as I said before, this is one thing that much of the furry fandom could do well to learn. Just because someone copies or traces, garsp, your shit, doesn't mean it is theft, or that you are entitled to damages. Kindly get over yourselves.
So Techdirt, enjoy your shiny new silver Cluon, and don't worry, you can copy it all you want. History is written by the winners, and so apparently is economics. That's why there's LibertyClassroom.com. Probably the best single learning resource for history and economics on the web, LibertyClassroom.com teaches U.S. history, Western Civ, and economics from actual university professors. There's lots of free material to get you started, including introductory lectures on all these subjects, and when you sign up, you get the full site's content for just $99 a year, less than the price of 2 cups of coffee a month. And if you type in the promo code Bogosity in all caps, you'll get your first year for just $88. Lectures are available in both video and audio format, so you can watch or listen to them on your computer, your phone or tablet, or in your car. Learn at your own pace about the subjects you're interested in and become a more effective debater. You'll also get access to lots of supplemental materials and even the professors themselves via the discussion forum and even live video chats. Inform yourself against the myths and propaganda of our society. Visit LibertyClassroom.com. And now let's desanctify this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And right about now, it's looking like the Brexit people might have had the right idea, and the Irish might be well to consider a similar move. The European Commission has slapped Apple with a judgment for $14.5 billion, billion with a B, in back taxes, saying that Ireland violated EU rules by not taxing them enough.
What?
So Ireland, your taxes are too low and we're going to step in and fix it, and Apple, you have to pay all of your back taxes even though you complied with every tax Ireland said you have to pay.
You know, I remember way back in about 2006 and 2008-ish how Ireland actually used to be pretty damn economically free, and they were doing wonderfully because of it. I can't help but wonder how much of that decrease in freedom they've had since then is because of idiotic BS like this from the EU.
I think pretty much all of it. I mean, they're still doing things like they've got, one of the lowest corporate tax rates in Europe. I think it's 12.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't even seem like the EU has even a basic protection against ex post facto laws.
Jesus.
Because, I mean, if you change the tax rate, That's why you're taxed from that point on, but they shouldn't be able to go back and say, okay, now you have... Basically, this is retroactive taxation.
Yeah.
That's what this is.
And it's bad when even the Irish government themselves don't want the money.
Yeah.
Yet they're saying no. It's like, what the bloody hell? There's just so much... This goes beyond comedy of errors. This is like Bizarro World stuff. Grief.
It's like they want to turn every other European country into Greece.
I mean, just looking at all this other stuff and regarding Brexit and everything, it looks like there's just so much corporatism and cronyism in the EU. Like, how, you can't have this competitor's these taxes because this one firm that's politically connected would hate that. Oh, you can't have this or that because this other firm in this one country will not like it. I mean, and I keep thinking, too bloody bad. Either get good enough to compete in a free market or bugger off.
I mean, I really want some statist out there. I mean, a full-on, dyed-in-the-wool, social contract-believing statist to try and defend this.
And despite them saying, it'll hurt the economy and the currency, one, it was only for about a week, if even that the pound was suffering. And two, it shot up and actually went higher than it was before the Brexit vote. And I think is higher than ever.
And so is a lot of other economic indicators in the UK.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about this before. They were talking about, this is going down, that's going down, stuff like that. And the amounts that were going down was basically noise.
Yeah.
So it really sounds like all the member countries can do about it now is get out while they still can.
Yeah, I've got my fingers crossed for Germany. Or hell, just dissolve the EU in its entirety. I mean, I don't really get the point of that thing at all. I mean, if they're really concerned, but now we can't travel freely from each country to country and stuff, why do you need a super-state organization akin to the Soviet Union for that?
Just sign a treaty.
No kidding. Or even better, just not have such onerous, idiotic immigration and other such laws to begin with.
What you should say is like, look, we're not going to have any immigration restrictions, and we're not going to have any tariffs. And that means that we'll get the benefit of all of that. And if you guys want to shoot yourself in the foot, go right ahead. But we're going to be over here being rich and prosperous and enjoying all those benefits.
I know a friend of a friend who recently moved to Ireland. For his and many others' sake, I hope Ireland does the right thing and gets the hell out of the EU while they still can, before it collapses on itself.
So all of that makes the European Union this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this I want you to take this crowbar and just bash my head right in edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes in the thumbnail, or become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Travis Retriever for joining me.
Rarf. Was fun as always.
Until next time, here's a quote from Pat Condell. The European Union is very popular with politicians because it's very good to politicians. It was created for their benefit. It's not so good to voters because it denies them a voice. Another reason it's popular with politicians. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial and Derivatives 4.0 International License. Bogosity. Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
Don't ask how I found this out, but apparently I've seen on some neo-Nazi sites that they really don't like this particular government organization. Something about I don't know, it was a bombing or a massacre in Waco, Texas, about 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, the Branch Davidian compound in Waco. I remember when that happened.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about the story behind that, but apparently it gets under a lot of neo-Nazi skin. Go figure.
Well, basically, David Koresh was a cult leader, but by all accounts, he was a pillar of the community, and apparently the ATF just decided, because they knew they had weapons, but it turns out all the weapons they had were legally purchased and kept. But apparently they just wanted, government bureaus have to justify their existence. So apparently they figured they'd go in and they'd raid it and they'd take out all these guns and parade them in front of the cameras and say, look at what a good job we did. And things all went south, and it ended up being this big standoff that lasted for, I think, upwards of 2 months.
Wow.
And they started bringing up all these things they had no evidence for whatsoever, like they were, sexually abusing children and stuff like that.
Grief.
And finally, it culminated when they started driving tanks into the sides of the building.
Jesus!
And doing chemical weapons attack, which they called tear gas, but it was actually CS gas, which is banned by the Geneva Convention. Exactly the same gas that is being used in Syria, and they're crying about, oh, see, that's a chemical weapons attack, that's so horrible. That's what they were using.
It reminds me of that one meme, one redneck guy saying, well, I need guns to protect myself against a military attack on civilians, even though it's never happened. What you just described sounds like a fucking military attack. Holy shit.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. And what about the militarization of police that's been going on?
Yeah, can't ignore that either.
Yeah, so it's not just the neo-Nazis that have a problem with that. Lots of people do.
Yeah, I can see why. Jesus Christ.